All right, good morning. We're live on YouTube. We got to bring in our Facebook groups. That's Atlanta Falcons on SI and Scott Kennedy Sports. We're about 50,000 strong over there on Facebook. So welcome in, everybody. We'll get started, and we're good to go. Welcome in, everybody. This is the Falcons Podcast. It is a Monday, a holiday week Monday. The kids are out of school. Got nice and cold over the weekend. Felt like fall. It's Thanksgiving week, and the Falcons are coming off a bye, looking to change things up a little bit. Don't quite know where the Chargers, your next opponent, are because the Chargers play tonight, which is a little interesting. We're not previewing their last game as much because they play tonight, Nick. Before we get started, I'm Scott Kennedy. I'll be your host. I am in the metro Atlanta area, up Alpharetta Johns Creek area. This is Nick. He's out in Seattle, so he gets up bright and early with this when he comes to join us, and we're thankful for that. So, Nick, how you doing today? You look peppy.
Peppy? I mean, I haven't had my coffee yet, but I had good sleep last night for the most part. Did wake up one time in the night because the dog jumped off the bed. We do let the dog sleep in the bed, which probably isn't the best in wet Seattle with a 80-pound golden, but whatever. He's a good dog. So now feeling good, excited for the short week. My mother-in-law is in town this week, which I know is always the joke about, like, oh man, your mother-in-law. But when your family lives 26, 28-hour drive away and you have a newborn, you'll take any hands you can get. And I really like my mother-in-law, so I'm happy that she's here. And also Victory Monday for the Broncos. My Hawkeyes won as well, back on the winning train. So yeah, things are looking up sports-wise out here.
From a sports perspective, with the Falcons off, Saturday was actually pretty good. So some of y'all know, if you follow me on Twitter, I put it in there, but I've also got the Auburn and Florida sites on SI. I manage those. So Florida had a big win. Auburn had a big win. Chelsea had a nice win. Alabama lost. My dad went to Penn State. He texted me. He was happy. Penn State won. I'm like, wow, the meteor should be coming in any minute. Should be coming in for a crash. And let's see. One of the reasons we go live is because, what's funny, Nick, is I have to bring up the when I'm looking over here, y'all, a lot of times I'm checking out the Facebook stream to see if anybody's coming with stars or anything like that. And as I start it, I have to mute it because it cranks up automatically, and there's always just a little delay. And your live stream was saying, yeah, my mother-in-law, and right as this came up on Facebook over here, goes, she's a good dog. All right, little inside baseball. Sorry about that. I know it was just caught me. Caught me is funny, but we go live because we like having the conversation with y'all. And John Harrell was in here before we even got started, waiting for the stream. I was a little late getting started this morning with the kids out of school. I did sleep in just a little bit more today. He says, good morning, Scott, Nick, and Falcons family. I'd be worried about the defense first, but they come out and play the same way they have all year. And where he's saying I'd worry about the defense first is Bleacher Report, and we took it and ran with it. They came up with a list of the 7 biggest trade pieces of the offseason. And on that list, at number 7 was quarterback Kirk Cousins. And I tie this in with what John says, because I think if the Falcons move on from Kirk Cousins, it will be because of the defense. It will be because this season has gone into the crapper, and you're not a quarterback away. And I'm watching Bo Nix slice and dice everybody on a weekly basis, thinking, maybe I should be doing that with my rookie quarterback instead of putting him on the shelf for 2-3 years if we're not winning anyway.
Yeah, I mean, if you are not in your window, it makes sense to get reps and see what you have in your quarterback, because it's not just, trying to build the team and build direction with that young quarterback, but you have to evaluate and see if he even is the guy, right? So that's a big thing. And if you have the defenses bottom, I mean, where would you put the defense right now? Bottom 5 in the NFL, Scott?
Yeah,
so
because I want to hit on one of the comments that came in here from Mark. He says this defense is not historically bad, but it's close. Is it more personnel or scheme? Mark, we'll get into that a little bit just to add on to what Nick is saying. He says it's a bottom 5. It is a bottom 5, which doesn't make them historically bad. That said, certain aspects of this team, including the pass rush, are historically bad. There's only been like 3 teams in 40 years that have had 10 or less sacks after 11 games. This is one of them. And it took a 3-sack performance from against a depleted, banged up, going nowhere until yesterday, beating Dan Quinn Dallas Cowboys team to even get to 10. Otherwise, if you're averaging 1 a game, there's a lot of your sacks right there. So historically speaking, parts of this defense are historically bad.
Yeah, interestingly, I mean, maybe it's some good games earlier or something, but you're sitting there 24th in EPA per play on defense this season. So there must be a lot of really bad defenses out there. If you're sitting there with the 9th worst defense this season, it feels like as of late they've been trending the wrong direction. And yeah, the pass rush is the big thing. I mean, you just don't have much getting home, and the scheme plays into it as well. You don't really have the guys, the ball winners up front, the one-on-one matchup winners to play as conservatively as you do elsewhere. So if you could have, multiple all pros out there and you could just rush 4 constantly and sit back, fine. The ball's going to have to come out because you have winners up front. But right now you just don't have difference makers along the trenches. Grady's kind of become he's stepped back this entire season, in my opinion. He hasn't been as dominant.
Which is understandable coming off an ACL injury that he's about 54 weeks removed from. It's just been a year since he's back from ACL injury. Yeah, Grady's in his 30s, coming off an ACL injury. He shouldn't be as good as he was prior to the injury yet, and he may never be again.
Yeah, you traded for Judon, who's been serviceable but not great, and you have these top 100 draft picks that, again, just not really dominating or developing. It really feels like. I mean, Ebikete's having his best season yet, but that's coming from pretty much nothing. And Harrison used a 3rd-round pick on. You'd hope to have a little bit more than you've had so far. You see granted, you don't want to totally depend on those guys being difference makers, but even just like, a tier higher would be great from those guys, because you don't just have to have the Myles Garrett and friends pass rush. You can have, the waves, kind of like what we saw with the Eagles 2 years ago, where they had good players.
Another bird team, like we saw with the Falcons last year, with 42 sacks, and the highest sack guy on the team was 6.5. There were 2 of them. It was Bud Dupree, who he at one time was a pretty good pass rusher, but he wasn't that guy last year. He was a good pro last year. And Calais Campbell, who's actually having a really good year this year and played really well last year. But you'd like to think, Nick, you mentioned Zach Harrison. Zach Harrison should have been able to step into Calais Campbell's role. Well, Calais Campbell's role disappeared. They took it off the field. Last year they went 3-4 with basically 3 down linemen and a stand-up edge. So it was more like a 3-3 base nickel. Mm-hmm. It was 3 down linemen, and then Bud Dupree is one of the stand-up edges, and then your 2 linebackers. So it would be a 3-3 base nickel. So Jimmy Lake plays a base nickel. That's fine. The problem is he's doing it with a 2-4-5 with 2 down linemen, 2 stand-up edges. Well, when your edges are arguably the worst group of players on your entire roster, why am I taking off another defensive lineman to put on an edge and going light and going soft? So we've beaten that horse to death.
And I will say, for the Falcons fans, if there's any solace to the defense and the changes that have happened from last year to this year, by far the worst defense in football this season is the Jaguars, who is led by former Falcons defensive coordinator Ryan Nielsen. They are, if you look at the EPA per play graphic, you have to create a multiple values further away. They're that much of an outlier with how terrible they have been this season. So that staff, that's a regime change. I think they have the number 1 overall pick right now. The Jags do as well. Mm-hmm. So it could be worse. It's not like, you let somebody walk in. It's like, oh my gosh, we'd have been great if Nielsen is still here. He was good. He was fine last season. Part of that, I think, was because the offense was so inept that offenses you were going against were playing more ball control, because the only way we're losing this game is if we make a stupid turnover kind of thing against the offense. But yeah, at least it's not, oh man, Nielsen's coaching a top 3 defense now. Why did we let him go? He's been horrible.
Yeah, no, it is. It's so much personnel. We saw Giro Evero. We both think a lot of him, and he goes to the Carolina Panthers and they stink. Ryan Nielsen, I think a lot of him. He goes to the Jacksonville Jaguars and they stink. It is a lot of personnel, but again, this particular scheme. A lot of times when you're getting beat, it's big plays that kill you. this scheme is so soft that it's death by 1,000 cuts, which is it seems like that would be a lot easier to come back from, to adjust to, than, okay, my secondary is getting cooked constantly. Well, Scott, your secondary was getting cooked constantly. That's why they play so soft. No, that's not true. The Falcons through like the first 6 weeks had the least amount of explosive plays against them in the NFL. So they weren't getting cooked constantly. So whoever, if that's on your brain, that's just not the case. They're getting beat by 1,000 cuts, and that is really frustrating when it leads to prolonged drives in bad field position, and your offense is constantly either getting the ball after a score or after a 30-yard drive and a punt, you're starting inside your own 10. That's every time the Falcons offense is starting. And they're getting limited possessions because they're bottom 3 in time of possession as far as per drive. So it's all cyclical. And let's say hello to some folks here, and we'll get back into the conversation. Michael Ranquillo, the Sunrise, he's in here. He says, good morning, Scott and Nick on the Falcons podcast. Right back at you. Rusty says, I know teams coming off games where they just played the Ravens historically don't perform well. Miss me with that, though, because the Falcons tend to set history for all the wrong reasons. That's true, but prime time this year, they look good. That was the first month of the season. The first month of the season was, Eagles, Kansas City Chiefs. I think was a solo game. I think there was one more, and there might have been the Buccaneers or the Saints, but they had like 4 games that were either Thursday or Sunday night games or Monday night games, and they played well on them. And they came back and won improbable games. And then they go to Carolina and just know that we can just play super soft and win this game. And you could, but then they've stayed that way. And I don't understand. I really don't. Yeah, Archangel, good to see you. Let's get it popping. Michael's here. Good to see you as well. Joe01, appreciate you being here. Says, good morning. After watching the other teams rush the passer this Sunday, it showed me how incompetent the Falcons' D-line scheme really is. Yeah, we get in our own little bubbles sometimes. And when you watch the other teams, it's really eye-opening. I figure one of the things that always catches me, and maybe it's because I know my team so much, or maybe it's just true, it always seems like every other team I watch plays so much faster than the team I watch. But the phrase is the game slows down for you. It's like, I think that goes to being a fan as well, where you recognize so much, you expect and anticipate what you're going to see, that it seems like everything slows down, because you'll watch teams that you're not used to seeing and it just seems so fast.
Yeah, I feel that way a lot too. Watching, they've been more so on the offensive side of the ball. Other teams' pass catchers get the ball, and our guys look like they're in mud watching Iowa or the Broncos. But yeah, no, it's always good to kind of evaluate where everybody else is at, and when you get time, watch other teams. So, and that's one reason that these advanced stats or whatever are also nice, because you can't watch every single rep of every single player. So if you can see something it's not going to be perfect, of course, no football statistic is, but you can at least, have a baseline to go off of with some of these stats. So yeah, Falcons have some work to do on the defensive side of the ball. It's why you brought in Raheem Morris. The offense is top 10. It's a little bit one-punched right now on the offense. You can pass and run, but it feels like, can't really play from behind so much in the drop back pass game. But yeah, you got a lot to improve on this season. Luckily for the Falcons, this is a horrific offensive draft coming up here. Really good running backs, really good at tight end. But the defense is, I don't think it's a good draft overall, Scott. I know we say that some years. I didn't feel that way last season, except on the defensive side. But this year's defense is pretty good, especially on the at cornerback and defensive line. So there's going to be options for the Falcons this year. I don't want to breathe. They're going to obviously take an edge rusher number 1. I know that we're a little bit maybe cursed in that front, but it's a good year to need cornerback or defensive line.
Yeah, I was just reading through Mel Kiper's column this morning on ESPN Plus, and he's going through the quarterbacks first, then the receivers. What's the deepest group? And it says edge, and I'm just like, I just shake my head. I'm like, of course it is. And the Falcons, the Falcons really need an edge rusher. Edge is the deepest group in the draft, so naturally They won't go edge. It just what makes sense to us, though, every single Falcons podcast is Lion Coffee. So we are a big fans of Lion Coffee. They are a partner. We were fans before they became partners, and one of the reasons they became partners is because we're such big fans. But we're big fans of lioncoffee.com. They are a Hawaii-based, Hawaii-grown, Hawaii-roasted, Hawaii-brewed coffee company. And it's all American, even if they're out in the islands. That's still part of the 50 and part of the family. And they power the Falcons podcast. Literally, they jumpstart Nick and I every single morning. So make sure you go to lioncoffee.com and fill up your shopping cart before Christmas with all kinds of stuff. It's not just coffee. There's chocolates, nuts, teas, all kinds of stuff. You can go check it out. And use our code they have given to us to give to you of GoFalcons20 to get 20% off everything except full cases and 100% Kona. Everything else, like what I'm drinking right now, which is the Aloha blend, is good to go.
Yeah, I'm drinking my Lion Coffee. Shout out to them. Sent me the Yeti thermos as well, which is fantastic. And yeah, it's gotten me through this past month, Scott. I'll tell you. Shout out to Patrick. Shout out to Lion Coffee. Appreciate the heck out of them.
So thank you. Check them out. Tag us on social media or something if you've got some Lion Coffee, and we'll put you on blast. Keith and Ellen Johnson. Keith, good to see you. He's coming with some stars over there on Facebook. Certainly appreciate it. He says, "Good morning, guys. Hopefully they're working on the defense during the break. Tampa is going to give us a run for the playoffs." Yeah, at the top of this again, the title of the show is Michael Penix Jr. Sooner rather than later. When could the Falcons make a change? And as I'm looking as a trade piece, I don't think it's this season, obviously. I think, that would have happened before the trade deadline. You're not going to pull the plug, and the Falcons were 6-3, 6-4 at the trade deadline. But I'm looking at now, when we get to looking at the Chargers game, I will pick the Chargers to beat the Falcons. It's a terrible matchup for the Atlanta Falcons. The Atlanta Falcons have a bottom 3 third down percentage defense. What did the Chargers convert against the Broncos, who have a top 3 defense? Wasn't it like 8 of 10 third down conversions in the first half of that game?
And I think they went like 13 for 17 or something. Yeah. I mean, it was Justin Herbert's playing at the top 5 level.
It was surgical. What they did. And then I'm like, they'll convert the whole time. And then their defense is really, really good. It's not a good matchup. They do a great job of holding onto the ball, and they don't give up many points. Okay, that's bad. You need somebody that has a bad defense that you can get into a shootout with. You'd have a better chance against the Baltimore Ravens, honestly, than against the Chargers.
I will say, so being in the AFC West and being a big-time Justin Herbert fan, have been for a bit, felt like when there was kind of a push against him, like, no, this is a bad Chargers team. Justin Herbert is actually really, really good. And he's playing like that now. It still feels like they're a year away from being the identity that they want up front. They want to run the football, Scott, and they do it by volume, but not by efficiency, which is resulting in a lot of third and longs. And that is, when you have a quarterback like Justin Herbert, that can be great. But when you're putting your quarterback at 3rd and 7+ constantly, especially a quarterback like Herbert, who's got incredible tools, but he can be a little bit streaky. There is the chance that he can be cold, and he could be missing ones, and you can be on 3rd and long, and that can help your pass rush. I hate to say it. The other aspect of this Chargers defense, I'm curious to see if the Ravens tonight can expose them at all, but it's a defense that's playing really good disciplined football. Like, I like the ideas from them, but I don't think they're overly talented over across the board. I love Henley, their linebacker. You'll see him in this one. He's a former, I think he was a wide receiver at UNLV, maybe a running back, and then transferred to Washington, played linebacker, and then transferred to Washington. I believe that's his pathway, but he's been awesome this season. They still have Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack's, one of the best edge-setting run defenders in the league. With their secondary, outside of Derwin James, is a bunch of, relative no-names, Scott. I don't think they're the most dominant pass rushing teams still, despite having some of those names. Bosa has not looked like Joey Bosa for many years, and Mack is still very good, but also getting older. Tuli Peloptu is pretty good. They're USC second-round pick from a couple years ago at edge. But again, I think it's more of a defense that's so much better as the sum versus the individual pieces. But that means that if you have a good offensive coordinator and quarterback, I think you can find a matchup and stick your fork in it a little bit, isolate some guys in space. So I'll be curious to see What the Ravens can do tonight, obviously, Ravens with Lamar Jackson to the Falcons with Kirk Cousins could not be any more different. But maybe there's some isolated matchups in the passing game that the Ravens can expose a bit, and the Falcons can jump on as well.
So you mentioned, what I keep hearing is, hey, that all sounds like good coaching to me.
I mean, there's a reason 2 years ago when the Broncos were on the market, I'm like, he's short-lived a little bit, but God bless, give me Jim Harbaugh, because he just every place he's gone, he's turned it around, and they've won pretty hard, pretty fast.
And they play the type of football that old school people at least really, really like. Mm-hmm. Oh, defense and a running game, hard nosed, make no mistakes, and grind people out. Physical, man, it's football. It's so I like Jim Harbaugh as well. I think it's going to be trouble. Let me see. There was a couple in here, a couple comments in here I wanted to hit. Steven says, every year people claim the Falcons must draft an edge rusher in round 1, and then they either don't or they draft a bad edge rusher. And it's been a while. Was Tack the last one that they drafted? And one of the problems is, I don't like the phrase best player available, because it rarely is. People use that like a trump card, like, oh, well, that's just the answer. Why did they go Kyle Pitts, number 4 overall? Well, he was the best player available. Well, says who? Time will decide that. So I at least want to call it, you can still go BPA, and for me, say best prospect available, because that's at least subjective. But the worst thing you can do is go in and reach and say, listen, we have this humongous hole in our team. We need to fill it. Let's reach with a guy we might not like nearly as good as this guy, but let's fill that hole. And the higher up in the draft you are, that matters more. That's not necessarily as important on day 2 and 3, because there's the tiers of guys are so balanced. It's kind of an exponential curve where it goes really steep at the very top of the top 15 guys in any draft, and then it starts to balance out where, yes, in the 3rd round, I'll have an even grade on somebody I need to fill a hole, and who I think might be, minuscule ahead. He might be 45th on my board, and this guy's 46. Well, if I have a need at 46, I'm going to take the 46th guy. So, that's but reaching. This is what I got out of this, Steven. My phone's blowing up. I thought I'd turn this off. Don't reach is basically what it comes down to.
Yeah, and I think, I will say, Scott, I don't think this is the class to take offensive tackle, but if you don't take defense round 1, offensive tackle, just for the team building right now with where Jake Matthews is at, McGarry's going to be gone also, right, Scott? So I don't think offensive tackle should be completely off the board for the Falcons. But
McGarry's still under contract. He's just expensive, so they could there's money there to restructure if they want to, which would kick some money down the line. But he's not overly expensive. 2025, he's got a cap hit of 16.5. He likely won't see that with a dead cap of 2. So you want to take a pay cut, or do you want to take a cut? Because you're going to end up taking a pay cut anyway, because no one else is going to pay you 16.5 either.
No way. Yeah. So offensive tackle is the other one that feels like it's just a premium position, and offensive line is another area that you should at least consider, right? But I don't think the draft really lines up that way, Scott. I think this is a pretty poor offensive tackle class off of my first viewing. Maybe it's kind of in juxtaposition because last year's offensive tackle class was very good. But we'll see what happens. We got our guy Michael coming in here. I got a care package from Puerto Rico from Michael. Those guava marshmallow pies, oh my God, Scott, they're pure sugar, but they are.
I'm giving them to my son. I'm like, eat these. I'm trying to lose weight. I'm down like 12 pounds. And I'm like, I do not need to be going through these right now. I've got the worst sweet tooth in the world. If I start, I'll eat the whole damn box.
He sends me the pineapple ones and the guava ones, but the guava ones are just unfreaking believable. Coffee as well. And also, honestly, my favorite thing Michael always sends in those care packages is a really nice handwritten letter as well. So, that just, I tear up reading it, Michael. It's so unbelievably nice of you. So appreciate you so much. Hope you're doing well down there in Puerto Rico.
So thank you very much, Michael, and appreciate you being here. Steven comes back. He says, if the Falcons are going to play like not going to play like a relevant team again, might as well put Kirk in bubble wrap and try and trade him as soon as the pick is offered. So we're talking offseason. Like, it won't be this year, but could Kirk Cousins be traded in the offseason And what would have to happen leading up to that in order for that to become a reality?
I mean, you have to see enough from Penix in practice and stuff down the stretch with the team kind of flailing, and maybe there's an issue in the locker room with the coaching staff and Kirk to move on. I can't imagine it happening. I didn't think contractually it made a lot of sense either. I think that you only save like $2 million with some crazy amount dead.
You trade him post June 1, and sometimes I don't understand this on Over the Cap. It's why I go to Spot Rack. Spot Rack makes more sense to me, but it's like, if it's a trade post June 1, I guess if you split it, it's like someone picks up the $27.5 million base, which isn't unreasonable for someone to do that.
No.
Then you end up, Over the Cap says you could end up saving with a post June 1 trade, you could save $27.5 million in cap savings for 2025. But by then, free agency's over anyway.
I wonder if you can do the trade before, but designate it as that. I mean, there's some weird like rules and how like the procedures work in that I mean, I have a 101 level of the cap understanding, maybe 201. Maybe I'll give myself a little bit more credit, but how the designations work with that, does that mean the move, like you have to hold that cap money onto your contract until after that, even though it's been agreed to? I'm not really sure how that works out. I see a comment here from Rudy coming in, says nobody wants a statue as a quarterback. I agree with you for the most part, Rudy. But I will say that if there's any offseason where you could potentially move a quarterback, it's probably this one, because this is not a very good quarterback draft class.
Right.
And sometimes it's a game of musical chairs. And last year, the Raiders were the team left out with 6 quarterbacks going in the top 12. This year, I mean, you look at the top of the draft, I swear it's like 8 of the top 12 teams. And there's really only like 2 quarterbacks at all that I'd have any interest taking in the top 10. And even then, I don't think they're, top 10, any draft class kind of guys. They're getting pushed up there because it's a weaker class and teams need quarterbacks. So there's going to be demand for a quarterback this offseason that the supply will not meet. And typically that's always the case, Scott, but I think that's emphatically true this offseason.
Yeah. And if it wasn't, you're not committing $100 million guaranteed to him, and you use him as a bridge quarterback because he's older and I didn't have to spend a whole lot to get him. I mean, let's say the Raiders were a little better right now, or the Giants were a little better right now. Would they give up a third rounder, for that? And you'd be about cap neutral. Let's just go with that assumption that you're about cap neutral with Cousins somewhere else, and then you start Penix. But I think part of it is, and what has to happen for me is the Falcons have to continue falling flat on their faces. That is what has to happen. No matter what Kirk Cousins does, if Kirk Cousins is playing well, but the Falcons continue to lose, and they've lost 3 out of their last 5 games, and they're against the Chargers, they're at the Vikings. Okay, so they could be 6-7. They're going to be underdogs in both of those games. They're looking at 6-7. Then you go at Raiders and then Giants at home. You should win those games. You're not really positive though, and you're talking about 8-7. At Commanders doesn't quite look as daunting, but that's certainly not a win. And you're sitting there at 8-8, and then you host the Panthers, you beat them at home, and you're 9-8. You're sitting there at 9-8. Maybe the Buccaneers continue like they did last year to go on a run. You don't make the playoffs at 9-8. Would you then consider making a trade? You bet your ass I would, because that's a disappointing season. And I don't need a 50, I don't need the bridge quarterback because he just bridged. I've got my first round guy ready to go. Year of seasoning, 25 years old, 50 starts in college. Let's go. He needs to play.
I mean, you took him 8th overall. The clock's ticking. The clock's ticking on Bijan as well. And there's not a slow build going on here. You've already come through the fire and flames that was the dead cap hit from Ryan and Julio. I mean, the time is now. NFC South, it looks pretty weak. The Bucs are probably going to be in some transition here. The Saints, Lord knows with them. So, I mean, this is the opportunity coming on right now. It's too bad. I think the offense is, definitely playoff contender, Super Bowl contender caliber, but the defense is so far off. So maybe you have to flip that and reevaluate where you are in the build of things. But I mean, it's totally, we talked about it from the beginning. it's you kind of wanted to. What's the phrase? Have your cake and eat it too. How does it go? Where
I'm sure there's a reason for that phrase, even if it doesn't make any sense to me.
It's just kind of
Why
like,
wouldn't
okay,
I want to eat my own cake?
Yeah, I was like, well, I made it. I better eat it. But it's how do you use like the draft and Raheem Morris and all these things kind of felt like maybe a little bit more of a slow build, right? Compared to Bill Belichick with Kirk Cousins and whatever that looks like. So I don't know if they fall flat. You're right. I think you're right. It might be a change of the guard. Might be inevitable. It's just
so I'm thinking 9-8 and miss the playoffs. There's a I won't say a good chance, but it becomes a much more, because I always figured you look at $100 million guaranteed over 2 years. He's here 2 years. Okay. He's here 2 years, no matter what. Well, if he's cap neutral next year and it's time to, and especially as I'm watching Bo Nix again yesterday, who just looks like he's evolved past the rookie problems. I'm like, okay, every quarterback's going to make mistakes, but he's not making rookie mistakes anymore. Okay, he's got 10 games under his belt. He's mature. Wouldn't that be fun? Kirk's played great, but wouldn't that have been, it's why you draft a quarterback, to see out of your 24-year-old guy instead of your 36-year-old guy. If as you're hovering right around 500, knowing that you're building, you're not a Super Bowl team yet, but isn't that kind of what you might be? Wouldn't it'd be more fun? Rusty says cutting McGarry and Grady saves you about $35 million. And I don't know, Rusty, if they'll cut Grady. They could go with an extension with less guaranteed money. And they could guarantee what his salary is next year and then put that across 3 years. And then that would be a restructure that would knock his cap hit way down without having to cut him. And then your dead money would be basically gone. So they could keep Grady with an extension, turn next year's salary into a signing bonus, into a 2-year extension. It knocks his cap hit down to like $5 or $6 million. You're still saving 15. Great. And McGarry's the same way. I could give him an extension and knock his cap way down depending on what else is available and save a bunch of money. But he says we have holes everywhere. That's why this year was so win now. Trade Kirk Cousins for draft picks. Maybe again. And I think what has to happen is the Falcons have to sputter around. And if you finish 9-8, even if you win the South at 9-8 and then get bounced big time in the playoffs, I mean, right now you'd hope you'd play Washington, and I don't think that's going to happen because they'd be a division winner too. That's the only way they're going to make it.
I don't think that's true.
Oh, no, you're right. Eagles are ahead of them. Sorry.
Yeah, the Eagles are running away with the NFC.
You'd hope you play Washington because I don't see really anybody else in the NFC that you stand a chance at beating the way you're playing right now.
I think you could probably handle anybody in the NFC West in a single game, but if you're both divisional winners, right? Who you're up against right now is probably the Commanders, the Packers, or the Vikings. I guess if you toss the Vikings in there, Scott, I mean, you could have a Sam Darnold masterclass, right? And by that, I mean, 6 interceptions and whatnot.
I think O'Connell's good enough to put the restraints on him just to say, don't lose the freaking game.
Anything can happen in one game, though. When you listen to the voices, Sam, listen, throw the ball. But that's
everybody's waiting for Kirk Cousins to choke. I'm like, dude, you got Sam Darnold at quarterback, and y'all are talking trash. Come on now.
Yeah,
be careful. I mean, the gods listen. Don't anger them. Just be happy, man. Really happy with the way Sam Darnold's playing. Long may it continue. Do not poke the bear. The gods. No. Vikings fans, you've been through some bad times. You understand how weird things can get.
Yeah.
Keep a low profile. Do not anger. Do not anger those gods of football gods.
Yeah, but right now I do think it's the Commanders are I think the Commanders are the 7th seed because the Vikings only have 2 losses and the Packers I think have 2 or 3 also. So the NFC North is pretty nuts. Yeah, we'll see what happens. I mean, you get in, you don't make excuses for it, right? NFC South, whatever. You get in and you see where it goes from there. But it would be disappointing considering the makeup of the offense this season and the cost control guys that you have on offense as well.
Dave comes in, he goes, for those saying last year's season's defense was a scheduling issue, I'm not sure I completely buy that. Some of the same players and that scheme last season now look lost, or Dave are lost. Like they're gone. They're, again, Zach Harrison, a lot of talk about him and, him taking the next step, benched by the scheme because there's no spot for a 285-pound defensive end on the field. There isn't one. You got 2 stand-up edges and 2 defensive tackles. Well, he's not big enough to be a defensive tackle, and he's not quick enough to play edge. He is a 3-4, 4-3 defensive end. That's his position. And they don't play that. They don't have that out there. So, but to the point of the schedule, yes, I'll concede part of this. Last year's scheduling issue. Last year was arguably the easiest schedule the Atlanta Falcons have ever and will ever face, with the quarterbacks coming in, the teams when they played them, looking towards next year. And somehow, Dave, to your point and to anybody else's point, they made some of those quarterbacks, including Will Levis, they put his ass in the Hall of Fame. You're playing against the Tennessee Titan team that's struggling. Will Levis is making his debut, and the Falcons defense disappears. Falcons defense wasn't this. I'm looking back and I hear some people see a top 10 unit. I'm like, guys, you're out of your minds. They may have finished in top 10 in yards allowed, but that was not a top 10 defense. But individually speaking, no one from last year's defense is playing better than playing better this year. Not a soul, not a one. And that's a problem.
Yeah. You might argue Ebiketie, just to be contrarian.
Ebiketie had 6 sacks last year. He played a lot better last year. He's out there running into the tackle and getting stood up. Every single one of these guys tries to bull rush. Every one of them.
Yeah.
There's no stunts. There's no twists. It's run into the guy and see if we can form a pocket. That's what it looks like their defense is. If they go forward, a lot of times they're going sideways.
And we talked about it on Wednesday, Scott. They're one of the worst run defenses in the NFL on first and second down. So you're getting a lot of third and shorts. And you know what you're not running on third and shorts? Twists and stunts. So I'd be curious. I mean, there's obviously a positive feedback loop there of what's happening with this team, but I'd be curious to see if they could follow potentially a Denver path this offseason, where you're not going to get Patrick Surtain, obviously, which changes what you can call up front. But Denver this offseason, they didn't bring in any superstars on the defensive front, but they solidified the interior and got much better against the run. And oh my gosh, now that it's 3rd and 8 more consistently instead of 3rd and 3, we're a little bit more exotic in our looks. We're running the twists and stunts. I don't have the average goal third down distance to go data in front of me, but I would imagine the Falcons defense has got to be one of the worst in the NFL.
The Falcons lost 2 really good pros in their front 7 in Bud Dupree and Calais Campbell.
And Campbell's playing awesome football.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, but he's played so good.
And what the Broncos did was import 2 really good veterans into the defensive line. And again, you're hoping Zach Harrison could make this step. Taquan Graham I like Taquan Graham, but again, he's then moved into a 2nd or 3rd team defensive tackle, and he's really a lot better as a 3-4, 4-3 defensive end as well. So again, they constructed this roster with a bunch of interior defensive linemen and then took one off the field. It makes 0 sense to me. Forget the fact that nobody on earth plays a 2-4-5 as a base defense. I thought that was like an experiment against the run and shoots in the 90s that went away and died a death that was never to be resurrected. But here we are. And Terry says, until Jimmy Lake is stripped of play calling duties, can't like the Falcons against any playoff caliber teams. Just is what it is. And again, one of the scary questions is, what if this is Raheem Morris's defense? That's the scariest question of them all, because we can just say, oh, things would get better if it wasn't for Jimmy Lake. And that's easy. We love to do that as fans because it's just one fix. No, that's not going to fix everything. No way. It's not. There's holes personnel wise. But again, if every single player is playing worse this year than last year, a change in defensive coordinator will help in a big way. There's still a lot of work to be done. That's not the solution. That's a step. But what if this is Raheem Morris's defense?
Yeah, I mean, certainly Certainly possible. It's his first year, right? You got to have him see how it kind of evolves a little bit. But do you want to give him more reins? I guess you got no choice there. I do see Soam saying we need Nielsen back. Nielsen's going to be available. Let me tell you. So if you want him back, he's going to have his information on Indeed.com, whatever, LinkedIn here, update his resume here soon. Cause that Jacksonville defense is putrid. We got Pamela coming in here saying, good morning. I can never get it right, Scott. We got good morning, Nick and Scott and everyone in the chat. Good to see you, Pamela. Hope you're doing well. Appreciate you coming in and hope you had a great weekend. Happy Thanksgiving week to you as well.
Where was Roy? Good morning, Pamela. Roy says, question for you guys. I know it's off subject. Do you see Bill Belichick coaching anymore? If he does one more year out, then I would say no. So I think he's either back this year or he's done. And he's kind of digging the media thing. I mean, it's funny. He's charismatic as hell, actually, because he's such a curmudgeon as a coach. He's actually got this really dry sense of humor, and he's funny. It's like, oh, this has been wasted all these years. I feel like Mark Calloway, better known as The Undertaker, his podcast is just awesome. He's hilarious. And he played a character in the WWE where he didn't speak. You're like, man, that was lost for years and years. Thank God we get to see Mark Calloway as The Undertaker now on this podcast. It's a little bit how I feel about Bill Belichick. It's like, he's funny. Nick Saban, these guys they're funny.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you can't be in that position.
I don't know if they change.
I think we'll see with Belichick. It does sound like his name is out there. If I were him, I'd be enjoying my rings and my 24-year-old girlfriend. No, not. I don't know if you've seen that, Scott. Or it's pretty. Yeah, no comment there. But he's got a former cheerleader girlfriend who's she's cute. But good for him. Must be nice to be rich and famous. I love my wife. But anyway, if Stephen B coming, Falcons haven't drafted an above average starting defensive end since Kearney. Yeah, it's been a bit. I mean, you haven't had like a difference maker at the edge since Abram. I mean, you had that 1 year from Vic Beasley, but Jonathan Abram might have been the guy there.
He was a trade. Yeah, he was traded. Let me see. We know it hasn't been recently, so I'm gonna go to defensive end. I'm gonna read through this. Marlon Davidson, he was a bust, and he was more of a defensive tackle. He's listed as a defensive end. John Kaminsky in 2019. There wasn't one taken in 2018. Deidrin Senat was the only defensive tackle taken. Oh, cover your ears, Falcons fans. I'll count to 3 and then cover them. Tack McKinley, 2017. Outside linebacker Deion Jones, and he moved inside more. He was still more of an inside guy. But Deion was a good player. He was a really good player. Devondre Campbell was in that linebacker class of 2016 as well. Vic Beasley of 15. He was a good player. He just probably wasn't worth an 8 overall. Before that, we'll go back to Kearney. Nobody in 2014. Malachi Goodman in 2013. He was really skinny. I've never even heard of this guy. I must not have been paying attention. Does anybody remember Stanley Mapunga out of TCU in 2013? Jonathan Massaquoi. He was a local kid. I think he went to like one of the Gwinnett schools, if I remember right. Not 100% sure on that. Cliff Matthews. I'm down to 2009, and I'm to Lawrence Sidbury. Nobody in 2000. Croy Bierman, he's listed as a linebacker. I thought he was bigger than that, though. Here's another. This one made money. We'll go back to 2007, so then we'll stop doing this. 2007 made one of my top 5 draft busts of all time. Was Jamal Anderson. So he made that list. He was also the number. What is it with the Falcons at number 8? He was also the number 8 overall pick. Jamal Anderson was one of the biggest draft busts of top 5 in Falcons history. And that's a long and distinguished group of players. You really got to work to make top 5 Falcons draft busts of all time.
Yeah. You're going to have a chance to get an edge rusher this class. We'll see what happens. Yeah, we get In Pursuit of Excellence, remembers Mapanga out there. But this is going to be a turning point for this Falcons team here as we're wrapping it up. And something I've said many times, Scott, this year is that if there's any team if I have an opponent coming up that feels like a must win, if there's any team I want them to play, it's probably the Ravens because they can batter the absolute heck out. It might be changing into the Eagles now. Scott, I don't know if you saw last night with what Barkley's doing. Oh my God. I mean, I don't even remember the draft class a few years ago, but it's like, oh, Bijan is just as good, best running back we've had, better than Barkley. And I'm like, I think you guys don't remember Barkley at Penn State because I know he did bad for the Giants, but I'd never seen anything like this. And now that he's playing in a good infrastructure and a good organization, wow, look at that. He's probably going to get some MVP votes. He's been unbelievable. But Ravens and Eagles up there, probably for the teams that I'd want to play, my upcoming opponent to play the most the week prior, because they will batter the absolute hell out of you.
Melda, good to see you. This is a newer name. Welcome to the Falcons Podcast. We're going to say good morning and goodbye. It's going to be a good aloha. Aloha just works. Hello and goodbye. For everybody says, good morning, guys. Good morning. Right back at you. Says, I've been a Falcons fan since the beginning, throughout the good times and bad. Just wish we had more good. That's for sure. It's not easy being an Atlanta Falcons fan. It's just not. So kudos to everybody here. You have character. You have loyalty. We love you for it. So Nick and I are going to hop out of here. Right now, we are planning on going on Wednesday because I want to talk a little bit about the Chargers. So we'll see how that Chargers-Ravens game goes tonight. And I want to talk a little bit more about the Chargers on Wednesday before Thanksgiving. So we're planning on going here. So make sure you hit that like and follow and subscribe button so you get your alerts in case we make any changes and we go on Friday because something went crazy. Want to say a special thank you to Lion Coffee. Again, go to lioncoffee.com and use your promo code GoFalcons20. That's also in the description of this video. Also want to say thank you to our stars and superstars, Rusty Moore and Keith Johnson. Thank you so much for making contributions to the show. It certainly means a lot. Nick, any last words before we get out of here?
I know that everybody's pretty frustrated right now with the Falcons, of course, but you're right in the thick of things. You own the first seed in the NFC South, and also the Buccaneers lost another starting player. They lost Whitehead for the year, I believe, as well. So I know they beat the absolute tar out of the Giants. Did you see Baker Mayfield's touchdown celebration? The making fun of Tommy DeVito?
I did, but I already forgot it. What did he do?
They're just like some Italian. It was like the Tommy DeVito. It was too aggressive. I don't know what's going on there. But yeah, it was pretty funny. But I mean, we get frustrated about this team all season. I saw a comment from Poor Boy in here saying that if they lose, they're going to check out. But I'll tell you, you're going to be starving for this product come April, come May, right? So enjoy the season because it comes and closes in the blink of an eye. So appreciate that. And yeah, we'll see you guys over on the Broncos side of things here after this.
Yeah, we're going to hop over to youtube.com/Mile High Huddle. If you want to keep the conversation going, we'll be going about 9:40. So in about 15 minutes or so. Mm-hmm. On that note, we're going to get out of here. Hope y'all have a great rest of your week. Had a good weekend. Happy Monday. Happy holiday week. Hopefully a lot of y'all have some time off. And if not, you're about to get some time off. And we will see you on Wednesday. Thanks for being here, everybody. See you next time.